Hey everyone, thanks for joining. And today we are going to talk about the person who's come to be known as the Angel of Death in Nazi Germany. His name is Dr. Mengele, and Dr. Mengele was um, a scientist, if you will, who performed experiments on Jewish prisoners in Auschwitz. All right, and so this discussion is a little bit about him. You can find some really great videos, testimonies, documents online. He is very well documented. Um, you'll also be surprised to find out that after all of his atrocities, um, he would escape arrest and he would die of old age living in Brazil in the 1970s. So that might be a little surprising to everybody that he escaped justice, um, which is quite unfortunate when you consider all the people that he harmed and killed. You don't get the name Angel of Death by allowing people to survive. Okay. Um, Dr. Mengele, I'm not going to talk or worry too much about his early years before his experiments and so on. But what I'm really going to focus on is his experiments in the concentration camps. Remember, the idea that Hitler believed was that the Aryans were the superior race, and all Aryans had certain characteristics about them. They were tall, they were strong, they were blonde hair, they were blue-eyed, um, they were the master race. Ironically, he was none of those things. He was not tall, he was not strong, he was not blonde hair, he was not blue-eyed. But uh, to him, it didn't matter. Okay, he was going to be their leader, right? Even though he didn't meet the qualifications. Well, Dr. Mengele was very curious about where did these characteristics or traits come from? How come some of these characteristics or traits are in people who are not Aryans? Okay, and so he wanted to perform these experiments. And he felt that the best way to perform these experiments was to perform them on twins. Okay, so identical twins would have almost identical DNA, characteristics, and everything like that. And so he figured he could have two twins. One would be the control, the one that he didn't do any testing on. The other one would be the one he tested, so he could see the differences and see how they reacted. And one of the other things he wanted to do was to see if there was some kind of connection between the two. Or that is to say, if I perform an experiment on this person, will this person feel it? Okay. So he did a lot of that. He would uh, test vaccines on um, these twins. He would first have to infect them with the disease, and then he would try and come up with a vaccine. And if it was successful, then that was good for the test subject and also for anyone who came down with that illness, say particularly typhus was one that he was testing for. But if he didn't come up with a successful vaccine, then the test subject died. And he was okay with it because, remember, to the Nazis, Jews were inferior. They were the cause of a lot of problems throughout history. And the result was less Jews, no problem, right? Their final solution, if you remember last week's lesson. Okay. So he would call in these twins. Let me back up. Twins or Jews would be carted into Auschwitz on the cattle cars and the trains. And as they were coming off of the trains, there would be Nazi soldiers who would be on the lookout for twins. Because odds are, as twins, they would be together. They would huddle together. They would try and protect each other or stay with each other because it's who they're familiar with and who they know. And so when the guards saw twins, they would call out, twins, twins. They would ask, are you twins? And they were hesitant because they didn't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing. And they would ask. And the guards said, it's a good thing if you're a twin. So the twins would identify themselves and they would be taken away and be taken to one part and everyone else would be taken elsewhere. Dr. Mengele would come into the barracks where these twins would now be residing. They would have already been stripped of their possessions, their belongings, their clothes and everything. And he would reassure them. One of the craziest things was as evil as a person as he was, he still came off as reassuring and um, kind despite his experiments. It was He was oftentimes called Uncle Joseph. His name was Joseph Mengele by some of these twins, Uncle Joseph. He would earn their trust by giving them candy and being kind to them, and then he would perform experiments on them. And so it's really kind of a strange situation how he did that and how he earned their trust. Um, so he would then perform these experiments, and some of these test subjects would be experimented on over and over and over again. They would have um, blood drawn from them in one arm and be given injections in the other. Um, of course, the subjects don't know what these injections are or the purpose of the blood being drawn. They're just there. They're not doctors. They're kids. They don't really understand fully. They haven't gone to school. They haven't become doctors or scientists or anything. And so he would perform these tests to see genetically. He would go further. He was an eye color. Can we change people's eye colors? And so he would even try and inject blue dye into brown-eyed test subjects, into their eyes, to see if he could change the color of their iris. Okay, so instead of a brown eye, I would have a blue eye. Oftentimes, the experiments left the subjects blind, and a blind subject is not useful anymore. So they would be euthanized or exterminated. He would do some really bizarre experiments where he would conjoin twins. He would sew them together. He would put that one pair of test subjects he put back to back, sewed them back to back, and sewed their hands back to back with each other. No idea what the purpose of that was, trying to see if they would grow together, if there would be a sharing of organs, or he would conjoin people in the most bizarre ways, many of which I really don't feel comfortable talking about. But it's well documented. You can find out all about it online with just a simple search. So it's really kind of scary, the extent that the Nazis went to perform their final solution on the Jews, and also to try and perfect the master race and find out what made people strong and what made people weak, and how can we sort of eliminate the defects that we don't want. And Dr. Mengele was the center of all that. He also used his science and his, quote, expertise in all of this testing to kind of avoid being on the front lines of war. When he was proved to the Nazi elites that he was more valuable to them as a doctor experimenting than a soldier on the front line, they made sure that that's what he was going to be doing. And so once the camps were liberated, he was caught. He was caught by and put on trial in Israel. He was released in Israel, of all places, right? Brand new country, home to Jews. He was released, and then they never caught up with him again because I believe they weren't really sure that that's who he was, that the person they had was this Dr. Mengele. And like I said, he escaped justice until he died in the mid to early 1970s. And so justice was never truly served on him. Okay. So that's really what there is about Dr. Mengele. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Send me questions on Edsby or any other way that you feel, email and such, remind, and I'll answer them the best I can. All right, so I hope this was at least a little bit informative. It gives you a little bit of insight if you haven't gotten to the activity yet. It gives you a little bit of insight before you get there, to hear a little bit about what they're going to be doing. Okay, all right, well, thanks for listening. Bye.